Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Truth Channel, where Canada, the illusion of freedom and system of control is exposed. Today's video, cognitive warfare. What in the hell is cognitive warfare, you may ask? To simply define it, I would say cognitive warfare is the deceptive manipulation of reality in order to ignite a reaction and or manufacture consent. How's that for a definition? Otherwise known as the illusion of freedom and system of control. So here we go. They have been using secret weapons in a silent war against humanity for a long, long time. Sun Tzu, back in 510 BC, discusses all war is dependent on deception. Sun Tzu also said in The Art of War that, to paraphrase, knowing yourself and knowing your enemy will result in victory in 100 out of 100 battles. Knowing yourself and not knowing your enemy will result in victory in 50 of 100 battles. Not knowing yourself and not knowing your enemy will result in defeat in every battle. So they've been studying us for a long, long, long time. Who are they? Your guess is as good as mine. The faces, the corporations we see, for example, the WEF, the WHO, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Davos Group, the World Health Organization, NATO. It goes on and on and on. These are the faces that we see. Who's behind those people and organizations, I don't know. But it's been going on for a long, long time. Look all the way back to the 1500s and Machiavelli with the Prince. Basically, a blueprint back then on how to control populations for nobility. So it's been going on for a long, long time. They have been studying us, so they know us. However, we don't know them, nor do we know the tactics they're using against us, which it's cognitive warfare, starting all the way from our education system, our indoctrination system, propaganda and psychological operations. It's all encompassing, and it is the blueprint for the system of control, for the illusion of freedom and system of control. They are absolutely deceptively manipulating our realities to ignite reactions and manufacture our consent. That's as simply as I can put it. And if you look at real world situations right now, they promoted the George Floyd case, and they omitted facts. They deceptively promoted that case, which ignited riots and caused $1 billion worth of damage. And all the while, for the most part, the mainstream media was saying mostly peaceful protests with pictures of burning cars and buildings behind them. mostly peaceful protests, they said. $1 billion damage. So they use psychological operations, including propaganda and including indoctrination, to control our very hearts and minds. It's very diabolical when you think about it and when you learn more about it and how where it comes from and how it's evolved. It's very, very disturbing. That being said, let's jump right in and hopefully to um, spark your interest and ignite a reaction for you to um, increase your knowledge and understanding. Here we go. So, this is from a book called Propaganda. It was written in 1928 by Edward Bernays. Now, Edward Bernays is considered the founding father of public relations. And here we go about deceptively manipulating reality. Okay, so Edward Bernays is a big part of that. So from 1928, propaganda, organizing chaos. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are able to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Wow, this is the first two paragraphs of his book. And um, this book is still used as a blueprint for corporations, for government, for anyone that wants to um, influence people without their knowledge. And it starts with the education system. Some of you may know by now that our education system is um, not intended to educate our children anymore. It is intended to indoctrinate our children. In fact, I heard a um, program on CBC radio, of all places, admitting in this program that schools are no longer educating students, they're indoctrinating students, especially in Ontario. I just heard part of the program, but I was surprised to hear it on CBC because, as you all know, the CBC and the mainstream media is the propaganda ministry of the Canadian federal government. Okay, so our education system. There has been more and more studies and information about this particular subject coming out lately. Many of us have known it for a long, long time that our education system is actually based on the Prussian model of education, developed in the 1800s after the 30 Years' War. The Prussians, Germans, were having trouble with civil uprisings and general um, ineffectiveness of the army, I'll say. So they developed this model of mandatory education. And today we're just going to have a brief history. So bear with me because the more you know the history, the more you'll understand, and the more you'll be able to put it into context into what's going on today. So, fast forward to the 18th century Prussia, where an entirely different philosophy of education was emerging. The Prussian model of education wasn't designed to create critical thinkers, it wasn't even designed for kids. Prussian leaders built it to produce disciplined, obedient soldiers who would follow orders without questions. This was in response to the military weakness exposed by Prussia's defeat by Napoleon. The defeat revealed shortcomings not only in the military tactics, but also in the population's readiness and loyalty. This led Prussian leaders to recognize the need for a more unified, reliable, and well trained citizenry that could support the state's military and political objectives. This shift in control allowed the state to decide what children learned and, more importantly, how they learned to think, or rather, not to think. In Prussia, schooling was a tool for control, shaping young people into compliant subjects who wouldn't question authority or run tail in the face of a cannon. So, early in the 1900s, Horace Mann brought the Prussian model to the United States. And in Canada, around the same time, Egerton Ryerson brought the Prussian model to Canada. He also visited Prussia and he also talked with Horace Mann. So he brought that system to Canada. And today we have Ryerson University. This is another article from UC San Diego. Educate to indoctrinate. Education systems were first designed to suppress dissent. As always, I'll leave the links to these articles below. I encourage you to read them all yourselves. Increase your personal level of knowledge and understanding, and then pass it on to someone else. Anyhow, my research reveals violence and can heighten national elites' anxiety about the masses, moral character, and the state's ability to maintain social order. In this context, public education systems were created and expanded to teach obedience, Paglayan said. Continuing in this article, she points out that during most of history of public schooling, secondary schools and universities were reserved for the upper classes. However, through primary education, states could easily influence the masses' children to respect authority, the state, and its laws. Children are like sponges, Paglayan said. Politicians thought that primary schools could shape behavior by instilling fear of punishment or misbehavior, or conversely, by promoting rewards for proper behavior. The mere act of attending school every day, sitting still, not speaking out of turn, and following schedules, routines, and rituals, like marching in silence from classroom to break room, would make individuals internalize from a young age what constituted good manners and civil behavior. So the Prussian model took the teaching of morals and behaving civilly in society away from the parents and brought it to the schools. And the intent right off the bat was not to educate students, it was to produce obedient, tax paying citizenry that did not question the all powerful government. Here's another article: Designed to Fail, A History of American Education. Education in America was designed from the start to fail children. That is not our fault. It is our fault that we don't change that system. And reading this from 1905, from a dissertation at the Teachers College at Columbia University. Schools should be factories in which raw products, children are to be shaped and formed into finished products, manufactured like nails, and the specifications for manufacturing will come from our government and our industry. And one of the people that started um, this whole business of propaganda, Woodrow Wilson, probably the worst president in history, responsible for the Federal Reserve. And don't get me started, but anyway, we want one class to have a liberal education. We want another class, a very much larger class of necessity, to forego the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks. Woodrow Wilson, former president of the United States. So, this is right during this time when they were implementing the Prussian system. Woodrow Wilson served 2 terms as president. In the first term, he destroyed the US with the Federal Reserve. In the second term, he ensured it would stay destroyed by implementing the propaganda ministry, basically. Are you starting to see a more clear picture now of the system of control and where it starts? So here's another article. It's hardly coincidence that the most notoriously despotic state in Europe, Prussia, was the first to have a national system of compulsory education, nor that the original inspiration, as we have seen, was Luther and his doctrine of obedience to state absolutism. Wow, right? So there you have it. Our education system was intended right off the start not to educate, but to indoctrinate and mass produce easily manipulated, tax paying, government obeying citizens. And more about Woodrow Wilson. So, one of Wilson's campaign slogans in 2016 is "Vote for me, we kept us out of the war." World War I was going on, and Woodrow Wilson, up to 2017, had kept the US out of World War I, and by popular demand. The US did not want to go send American boys to go fight a European war. So he narrowly won in 2016, and one of his campaign slogans was "We kept us out of the war." So along comes 2017. Now the US has to get into war. There, I don't want to go into it, but the US is getting into World War I. And because Wilson had campaigned, "We don't want any part of this war," but now he's joining the war, he had to sway public opinion, massively sway public opinion. And um, how he did this is he created the Committee on Public Information, which was known as the CPI, which I will call the Ministry of Propaganda, because that's exactly what it was. All throughout the war, it promoted um, Americans fighting for freedom. It promoted um, patriotism and duty and honor to join and all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time, it was using dark propaganda against Germany in the war. And if you look back at some of the propaganda they were using, it's absolutely horrendous, both in World War One and in World War Two. So anyway, Wilson creates the Committee on Public Information so he doesn't get lynched by the American people. And the U.S. joins the Allies. The war is over, and all is well. Well, one as an example, the "I Want You" poster stems directly from the Committee on Public Information. That was one of their propaganda posters. Anyhow, one of the members was Edward Bernays, and his job, he was recruited um, from New York. His job within the committee was writing propaganda for Latin America. Now, Edward Bernays was a publicist in New York City before the war. He is also, or was also, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I know, ladies and gentlemen, you can't even make this stuff up. It's so diabolical. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Okay? So, Edward Bernays, his nephew and very much student of Freud and all his teachings and studies, goes to work for the Committee on Public Information throughout the war. The war ends, and the public is now very aware of the word propaganda and the use of propaganda. They've seen all the terrible posters throughout the war. They've heard all of the radio shows. They heard the 4-Minute Men, which was another creation of the committee. And there was like 75,000 of these 4-Minute Men that went everywhere where they could gather a crowd and they would deliver these pre-prepared propaganda speeches all over the country. So, anyways, the committee was up to propaganda throughout the war. Now, after the war, Bernays recognized that the word propaganda had negative connotations because of what the people just saw. So he rebranded propaganda as public relations, and therefore he is known as pioneering public relations. Often referred to as the father of public relations, Bernays in 1928 published his seminal work, Propaganda, in which he argued that the public relations is not a gimmick, but a necessity. So, yeah, he took what he had learned from Uncle Siggy and applied it throughout World War One, refined it throughout World War One, brought it home, rebranded it as public relations, and started in business. Um, one of his campaigns was from the Beech Nut Company, which we'll get into, but regarding breakfast. I encourage you all, once again, to go through these articles and learn more on your own. And ironically, once again, the CBC, the propaganda ministry for the Canadian federal government, did a big piece on propaganda. Quite remarkable, and actually, it's quite a decent article. It goes through the history and all of that stuff, and it touches on torches of freedom, which we're going to touch on next. And part of his writings in propaganda, he wrote after 10 years of war, it opened the eyes of the intelligent few in all departments of life to the possibility of regimenting the public mind. So, once again, he took everything Uncle Ziggy taught him, everything he learned in World War One, and was like, wow, I can influence all aspects of life, and this is vital. This is vital because he considered himself one of the elites that should be controlling the world. Just absolutely remarkable. So here's his book, 1928, and let's look at some of the things he said. So we've already seen this in the first quote, but to review, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. I would argue this is required in order for the elites to maintain control. Societies functioned well on their own without millions of people in the government. Today, however, a reaction has set in. The minority has discovered a powerful help in influencing majorities. It has been found possible so to mold the mind of the masses that they will throw their newly gained strength in the desired direction. In the present structure of society, this practice is inevitable. Whatever the social importance is, done today, whether in politics, finance, manufacture, agriculture, charity, education, or other fields, must be done with the help of propaganda. Propaganda is the executive arm of the invisible government. Universal literacy was supposed to educate the common man to control his environment. Once he could read and write, he would have a mind fit to rule. So ran the democratic doctrine. But instead of a mind with universal literacy has given him, but instead of a mind, universal literacy has given him a rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with published scientific data, with the trivialities and of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought. Each man's rubber stamps are the duplicates of millions of others, so that when those millions are exposed to the same stimuli, all receive identical imprints. It may seem an exaggeration to say that the American public gets most of its ideas in this wholesale fashion. The mechanism by which ideas are disseminated on a large scale is propaganda, in the broad sense of an organized effort to spread a particular belief or doctrine. So here again, he states, I'm aware that the word propaganda carries too many carries to many minds an unpleasant connotation. So he just simply rebrands it public relations, and um, more and more. The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government of society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man in the group. Established that the group has mental characteristics distinct from those of the individual and is motivated by impulses and emotions which cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. So the question naturally arose, if we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will and without their knowing it? And this is the whole premise. Um, they actually instill in us from indoctrination and other sources the beliefs that they know, if they add a stimuli, are going to ignite these reactions and produce these results, and that we don't even know that they're doing it to us. This is the most diabolical part about this. And this goes back to reflexive control. In my reflexive control video, the Canadian government in the end said reflexive control it's so diabolical, it should never be used against civilian populations. And then what did they do? They turned around and used it against the people of Canada. First with COVID, and then in Nova Scotia with the um, fake wolf scare. Crazy. Anyhow, back to serious stuff. No serious socio all soci my tongue's tied today. Sociologist any longer believes that the voice of people expresses any divine or especially wise and lofty ideas. The voice of the people expresses the mind of the people, and that mind is made up for it by the group leaders in whom it believes and by those persons who understand the manipulation of public opinion. It is composed of inherited prejudices and symbols and cliches and verbal formulas supplied to them by the leaders. Fortunately, the sincere and gifted politician is able, by the instrument of propaganda, to mold and form the will of the people. Wow. Hey, ladies and gentlemen. So, crazy stuff. Read propaganda for yourself. It will give you a mind expanding understanding of what's going on today. And to prove what I'm talking about the deceptive manipulation of reality to ignite a reaction or manufacture consent, Bernays and breakfast. Stick with me because in his own words, he'll describe to you the creation of bacon and eggs for breakfast. And then, if you can still hang in there, he's going to explain the torch of freedom scam that he pulled on women to get them to buy more cigarettes. Here we go.
Many years ago, our client was the Beechnet Packing Company. One of their basic problems was bacon. We made a research and found out that the American public ate very light breakfasts of coffee, maybe a roll, and orange juice. We thereupon decided that the only way to meet the situation was as follows. We went to our physician, found that a heavy breakfast was sounder from the standpoint of health than a light breakfast because the body loses energy during the night and needs it during the day. We asked the physician, after telling him why we were talking to him, would he be willing, at no cost, to write to 5,000 physicians and ask them whether their judgment was the same as his, confirmed his judgment. He said he would be glad to do it. We carried out a letter to 5,000 physicians. Obviously, all of them, we got about 4,500 answers. All of them concurred that a heavy breakfast was better for the health of the American people than a light breakfast. That was publicized in the newspapers. Newspapers throughout the country had headlines saying 4,500 physicians urge heavy breakfast in order to improve health of American people. Many of them stated that bacon and eggs should be embodied with the breakfast, and as a result, the sale of bacon went up. And I still have a letter from Bartlett Arkell, president of Beechnet Packing Company, telling me so.
Can you believe that? Even breakfast is a friggin' scam. Now, he claims the doctor and the other doctors wrote the letters for free. I highly doubt he was able to convince 5,000 or 4,500 doctors to do this for free. Does that sound familiar to anyone? 99% of scientists say the science is settled. 98.6 scientists say. Experts agree. Does any of that sound familiar? Well, there you go. Breakfast. Yep, breakfast. Now, this next one is especially diabolical, and I'm not sure if he was aware of the Russian doctrine of reflexive control as a psychological operation at this time, but the torch of freedom. Um, in the 20s and 30s was the big part of the women's liberation movement. And this diabolical, evil bastard knew that. And he took advantage of women's beliefs and emotions, manipulated reality in order to sell them cigarettes. I shit you not, it's unbelievable. And here he is telling the story himself.
One day, Mr. George Hill, president of the American Tobacco Company, or the largest, maybe the largest tobacco company extant at that time, called me in and said, we're losing half of our market. And I said, why, Mr. Hill? He said, there's a taboo by men that does not permit women to smoke, either in public or even at home. What can we do about breaking down that taboo? I said, have I your permission to see a psychoanalyst? He said, what'll it cost? I said, let me ask. So I called up Dr. Brill, who was one of the great disciples of my uncle Sigmund Freud, said, what'll it cost, Dr. Brill, for me to have a little conference with you on a question that is of importance to the people whom I'm working with? And he said $125, which at today's purchasing power would be about 20 times that. So I went to Dr. Brill and I asked him what cigarettes meant to women. And let me say in parenthesis that cigarettes at that time were not regarded as dangerous to your health because that had not been found out yet. In fact, they were regarded as symbols of manhood. Little boys smoked them to prove that they were older than they were. And they were regarded as symbols of importance in the society, giving pleasure and so on. So I went to Dr. Brill and asked him what cigarettes meant to women, and he answered very quickly, cigarettes are torches of freedom to women. They want to smoke to dramatize man's taboo against women by not permitting them to smoke, and that's why they want to smoke. And then he added as an afterthought, and they titillate the erogenous zones of the lips. Here I had my $125 worth of knowledge. What could I do with that information? I decided that there were 2 days of freedom in the United States. One was July 4th, political freedom, but that was no good because people were in the country using firecrackers to celebrate the day. They were permitted at that time. This was some 50 years ago. The other day was Freedom of the Spirit, Easter Sunday, and it occurred to me that any young debutante who was aware of the times and of herself as a woman being discriminated against would be delighted to walk in the Easter parade with her bow to dramatize the idea that cigarettes were indeed torches of freedom, and to validate and to invalidate the taboo against women smoking. So I called up a debutante friend of mine asked her to get another friend and two young men whom they liked, and I also instructed them on how to give information about what they did to the newsreels, weekly newsreels, to the newspapers, to the three important press associations, the AP, the United Press, and International News Service, and to walk from 34th Street to 57th and back and forth, lighting torches of freedom to protest man's inhumanity to women by a taboo against smoking. Next morning, there wasn't a newspaper in the United States, even the New York Times had a front page story, "Debutantes light torches of freedom to protest man's inhumanity to women by a taboo against smoking, lighting cigarettes in their walk." The interesting thing to me was that within 3 days, the newspapers, without any intercession on my part, published accounts that women were smoking in Union Square in San Francisco, in Union Square in Denver, and on the Boston Commons. And to my surprise, within 6 weeks, on their own, without any intercession on my part, the League of Theaters, which had a ban on women smoking in the smoking rooms under the orchestras of every good theater in New York, lifted the ban and women were allowed to smoke. That obviously set a trend, and the Surgeon General's statement that cigarettes were dangerous to your health did not come out until about 30 years later.
Wow. Hey, is that not completely diabolical? Now, think of what he just said. Remember, he's the founding father of PR. Think about what he just said. Now, number one, there was more than a couple debutantes. He had paid a whole bunch of actors to do this, and the press was all alerted when it was going to happen. They all lit their cigarettes all at the same time for the picture. It was a staged event. He doesn't admit that here, but he kind of does. He just doesn't admit the extent of the setup. So, wow, right? Now think about that in context to everything that's going around in the world right now, everything that's going on. Um, put your emotions aside. I know it's difficult to do because these these messages are designed to trigger our emotions and ignite certain predetermined reactions. So be aware of that. And the more you learn about it, the more less susceptible you'll be to manipulation. On a subconscious level, there are some things getting through, but at least you're aware of what's going on and maybe be aware that subconsciously maybe some of this stuff is getting through. So you might have to wrestle your subconscious a little bit in order to find the right path. That being said, thank you for everyone that's watching and sharing my videos. Please follow the links that I provide. Share this information, and if you like the video, give a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.